everybody, and welcome to another episode of Three Big Questions. I am your host, Ross Hirosian, the founder and CEO of Tricycle Creative. But of course, you knew that already. But here are some things you don't know. I have a fantastic guest on today's show. So fantastic, I can't even book him during the week. He's busy. He's flying around the country. I don't know. I made that part up. It's almost impossible to get a hold of this guy, but I did. And you're going to be like, whoa, so happy that he is here. But I'm not going to tell you who it is. So, oh my God, it's like a radio tease going on there. Before we get into today's guest and before we get into the three big questions, I want to ask you, are you on Instagram? Are you, Instagram? I know people are like, wow, who's not on Instagram at this point? There are people who are not on Instagram yet. There are also people who are on Instagram who don't fully know how to use Instagram, right? This could be for a business. This could be for your personal use. I actually see a lot of parents who are on Instagram because their kids went there and they followed them there, but they have no idea how to use Instagram, right? I also work with clients who almost feel guilty about saying, I don't know exactly how to use Instagram. You don't need to feel guilty about not knowing Instagram. In fact, my mom reached out to me. My mom reached out multiple times in the past several months. Curious. She's curious about Instagram, which I was like, oh, geez, that's, uh-oh. And I kept avoiding it. But then I finally dove in. And the past couple weeks, I actually spent training my mom on how to use Instagram. And when I did that, I built the exact course that I used to train my mom on Instagram. And I am now making it available to everyone. And it's called Instagram 101. So before we get into our three big questions, I again want to ask you, are you on Instagram? Do you know how to use it? And if you don't, then I encourage you to check out this Instagram 101. It's the newest Training Wheels marketing course by Tricycle Creative. It is a whopping $15 and it is 100% online, self-pacing, on demand. And we even have a promo code for you a little bit later in the show. And also down below in the comments or in the text, you can use Weird Homes Tour and save $5, right? So you can now learn Instagram, whether it's for personal or for business, for $10 using Weird Homes Tour as your promo code. Now, that is a real big spoiler to figure out who is my guest today on Three Big Questions. And that guest is the great personal friend, client of Tricycle Creative. He was one of the reasons I moved to Austin. Well, he helped make me feel good about moving to Austin. It is David J. Neff of Weird Homes. What's going on, man?
Hey, everybody.
Howdy.
Thanks for having me, man. I'll have to quiz you on why I helped you move to Austin later.
You were just one of the good people. We talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but I talked to, whenever you move to a place sight unseen, and you reach out, does anyone know anyone that lives there? And you talk to those people. When they're really nice, you're like, oh, okay, that helps. That really helps. So you were one of the nice ones. So
good. Yeah, I'm happy to play unofficial ambassador to Austin. Anyone who's interested. One day when I run for city council,
I'll remember,
just vote for me.
For sure. So why don't we, before we get into our three big questions, why don't you tell the folks at home a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. So David J. Neff, at DaveIM on Twitter, and also Weird Homes Tour on Twitter and Instagram and basically any platform you can imagine. But I am the CEO and co-founder of the Weird Homes Tour. And we've been doing that for about 7 years now. And what it is a nationwide arts and kind of architecture tour of some of the strangest places and people that exist in the United States. And we do that in a bunch of different cities. and we take a percentage of all of our profits and actually donate that back to nonprofits that are working around affordable housing, because affordable housing is just a huge problem and thing people should be helping and concerned about all across the United States, as I'm sure a lot of you have experienced yourselves. So that's the Weird Homes Tour.
Yeah, it's it can be found online. We're gonna obviously, I have some of the information down below, but there'll be some ways you can connect with David later on in the show for sure. So now that you know a little bit about him, I think that's as perfect a time, if you will, to jump right in to the first big question.
Let's do it.
All right. So what are you working on right now? Never has there been a more loaded question with COVID.
No, a lot of things, as always, but no big deal. Just pivoting my entire business model during the coronavirus. So
easy.
Nice and easy. I sleep great at night. I'm not stressed or worried at all. So what we've done is, everybody watching, and as you know, we have physical tours of interesting architectural homes, collectors, oddities, people who love to collect every Happy Meal toy that has ever existed from McDonald's since 1982. And they have an entire room about that, right? And people buy a ticket, they get a map, they get a wristband, they go on these tours. And so our entire business model, much like restaurants and salons, museums, has just been absolutely upended. And so what we're really working on is like, great, if we're in an environment where we can only do that, in maybe one or two of the cities, or we have to keep pushing it out, or local public health officials say it's safe. A week later, it's not safe. 2 weeks later, it is safe. Well, do people feel safe, right? What is the actual community of people? We've just been trying to pivot and change that business model so we can survive.
So as someone who's been working that, as I'm sure, and I kind of say hope, but maybe I don't want that to be misinterpreted. I've talked a lot on some of these shows just about that, if you're just sitting back and waiting for business to just get totally back to normal, I don't know if and when that's going to happen. So
not going to happen.
Yeah, at least not for a while. And even then, it may never look the same. So my question is, what's that process been like for you? I mean, what are there any kind of like struggles or learnings, or what has that been like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I talk to people in grocery. I talk to people who are in fuels and like convenience stores, just a lot of like small business friends and people who work at big businesses. And, we think the world's going to take a long time to get back to normal. I think people are now doing curbside at grocery. And, my mom and dad, your mom learning Instagram is now like, I guess I have to download an app and schedule a time to pick up my groceries at H-E-B or Kroger or Albertsons. And you can imagine millions of people are doing that. And so I think there's a wholesale push for everyone to be more digitally connected. I think that's staying. I think that like the average guest of our tour is two demographics, right? And you've seen this data. Mm-hmm. It's like 50 plus, and then it's like 25 to 40.
Yep.
And the 50 plus are like, hey, I'm going to your website, but I had a question, right? On how to buy this ticket or what that looks like. And not all of them, of course, just like generalizations here. But now they're having to do that for grocery.
Yeah.
Now they're having to have their card activated because they don't want to touch the gas pump. And they do the near field communication, NFC, right? Or they do Apple Pay, which is the same type of mechanism, because people are worried about touching
That's
things.
An interesting thought, because I guess I had thought about that, but now that you mentioned that, it kind of brings me to like this semi-forced learning and adapting of technology, right? So
That's
part
right.
of my Instagram 101 was, my mom had interest in Instagram, and I spent 3 weeks with her, and I did the exact marketing course that I'm now offering. And I actually have a video coming out with that next week. So I actually videoed that process of me with my mom to that piece. But I also spent some time teaching my dad how to use Zoom, which,
Right.
So anyways, I bring this up because it's like, not just thinking about, oh, I have to move my business there. Well, let's talk about this. Is the audience, are your customers now going to be more likely to live in those, to access you, to interact with you, to be on those places because they've become so maybe used to, or they become familiar with using Zoom now, using, those, again, the NFC, whatever the case may be, using technology tools that they weren't using before.
I believe it's a wholesale shift in human behavior, especially for, let's say, for the boomers, maybe for Generation X a little bit, right? Y and Z are fine, and they get it, but it is just a wholesale shift in human behavior. And so I think that you and I are used to ordering something on Amazon. It comes, it's fine. But even I'm like, okay, if I want groceries, I guess I'm downloading this app, which is not great, by the way, and scheduling time on curbside.
Yep.
And the company is now saying like, oh, crap, yeah, we haven't had to invest in curbside or grocery pickup or Uber Eats or Instacart. We thought that was over here. And now it's here affecting all the people, and people actually don't want to come and walk inside.
Or conversely, looking at the entire supply chain, right? Not only that, like maybe in this case, the grocery store, but let's also talk about the restaurant, right?
Yep.
The restaurant who maybe wasn't as invested, if you will, in delivery or takeout or Grubhub or paying that fee to, like those kinds of things, that all of a sudden has become, a necessity, and I think maybe a lifeline in some of those cases. It's been a shame living in a city in Austin, Texas, where we have so many, it's such a food city, food-centric city.
Yeah.
And to see every week the restaurants that are closing down, it's sad. It
is. And, I feel that there's a wholesale change in human behavior. And those restaurants are the laggards on everything, right? They're like the last people to have a website, the last people to be on social media.
Yep.
They're like just now starting a YouTube channel so you can like cook at home. And now all of a sudden they just got punched in the face, right? And are like, oh my God, you know what? We should have our chef and we should have takeout meals. And we could probably charge a little bit more. And I know I paid a little bit more for my wife to have a little Mother's Day gift, like some tacos she loves from Suerte, and I went online.
I might also go out on a limb and say you've been very contributory to Suerte. I've been seeing the grams. Yes. I see all the. I know what Shelly likes now. I know
right now. Where's my loyalty card?
Yeah, right. Hey, Suerte, heads up.
And so for them especially. Again, hey, I'm happy to be a paid influencer if you're watching Suerte, let me know, is that we show up, we pop the trunk, they put it in the trunk, they hand you your bill through the window, no contact, touchless, right? And there's this idea of touchless commerce. There's this idea of contactless commerce, and not just like how you and I would like pay for a bill, but like how we dip our phone to pay, which is obviously everywhere but the United States. And then, I think people are just also going to think more about safety and cleanliness, using those online tools, and those restaurants that are getting crushed because they haven't invested in any of that. And the same for grocery stores, and they're all investing. And that's what we're doing now too, is like, trust me, we've invested a lot as a home tour in online, our presence, the social media beast that people like you help us feed and understand. But now we're like, doubling down on that, and trying to figure out like we need to survive by continuing to have physical events and people still come out. But like, how do you build on top of that?
And I would also say, I brought up before that now is as good a time as any to actually attempt to build out your business in a different way through potential partnerships, right? Like, the stronger, you're kind of, there's some metaphor there, which escapes me, but there's some Bible limerick. I don't know. There's something here about together we're better than alone.
Sure.
Hold on, let me drink some more coffee.
there's like an ancient Chinese proverb there.
Okay, I got it. Actually, I got it. Okay. The 6 samurai brothers, they're each given a stick. And their father says, try to break the stick. And they'll go, oh, that's so easy. But then you put the 6 sticks together, David. They put them, they said, now try. Oh, they couldn't do it. There you go. You're welcome. I got
it. Someone chat that to you, or did you just think of that?
I thought of that. It's in the Phil Jackson book, the 11 Rings, which I recommend. We're not talking about that. But you actually have a partnership. I don't know if you are allowed to or want to share it here, but talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we've always had a great partnership with the Modern Home Tour. The Modern Home Tour has been great partners. It's MADS now, which is Modern Architecture and Design. So if you guys just Google Modern Home Tour, they're in a ton of cities. We're in a ton of cities. We're actually probably the only 2 national home tours that exist in the United States, which is crazy to think about. And so we just partnered together to do a guest comfort survey.
Wow.
Right? We designed like a 10-question survey to gather all this data and see what people expect in the new world. And we're still getting all that data back and figuring out, are we releasing it? Are we doing a press release? Are we like, what does that look like? And we just talked to people who bought tickets in the past, right?
Yeah.
So very focused on an existing set of customers, not random guy named Frank who's on our Twitter account.
Sure.
No offense, Frank. I know you're watching. You're typing in an angry note to me right now. Just send it my way.
I'm
like,
Frank.
There's a big difference. Exactly. He's writing a letter. There's a big difference. Mail it to Ross. He lives there. There's a big difference between that general audience and the people who actually have behavior and intent to purchase a ticket in the past and buy a new ticket. Yeah. So that's one thing. We're doing that kind of together. And then the other one, which I'm very excited, exclusive to this for sure, because I haven't talked to anyone else about it, is we're doing a partnership with Atlas Obscura. Ooh. So Ross, have you heard of Atlas Obscura in the past?
I have, but I listen, Feet to Fire, I don't know if I could like put my finger on exactly what they do.
Yeah.
I've heard the name. I know the brand, but full disclosure, I don't know exactly what they do.
So Atlas Obscura has an online community of about 1.3 million people who've built this collaborative, beautiful, amazing web community where people share interesting and wild and inspiring things from all over the planet. So you can imagine you go to Atlas Obscura, you type in Bulgaria,
sure.
and
which
someone has crowdsourced,
of course,
as one does, sure. Wakanda, Latvia, whatever. Sure. Type it in. Yep. 50 recommendations of what to go do in that country, and not like go visit the National Museum. It's more like, hey, did you know that the only medical cadaver museum in the world is in the capital of Bulgaria, and it's amazing and kitschy and interesting. And if you're a doctor, you'll appreciate it, but a normal person could go there and appreciate it too, right? And they curate all that, and they have one thing. They came out with a book that's like a best-selling book on Amazon and the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times a couple years ago. And people actually plan their vacations with this book, like going through these fascinating.
That makes sense. I always like the off the beaten path. I am a UNESCO guy, right?
That's right.
I love a good UNESCO site. You know, I'd love by the end of my life to have visited many UNESCO sites. So I can appreciate that may be part of it, but I'm sure there's other stuff that's off the beaten path.
That's right. And they reached out to us probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. And we started talking about what a partnership would look like. How could we do Weird Homes Tour, Atlas Obscura collaboration? Kanye, Adidas, maybe we're not there yet in the collaborations, but like we're working our way there.
Sure.
And just said, in physical events, could we run tours in New York every weekend? Mm-hmm. Could we do something in New Orleans twice a month with an actual guide taking you to these different home tours? And then boom, COVID-19 hit. And sat down and had a great conversation with them to be like, okay, you know what? We're going to start with online. And so Brandon Hodge, who's amazing.
I know Mr. Brandon Hodge.
You know Brandon.
I do.
You should do 3 questions with Brandon, and I'm sure they would be fascinating.
I got to come up with 3 new questions for him. I'm not going to be able to go with the normal ones.
And he'll be our first one where you will buy a ticket on the Weird Homes Tour website or Atlas Obscura's website, and you'll get a link to a Zoom, and you'll spend an hour with Brandon as he goes through his collection of spiritualism items.
He's got cool stuff. He's got cool stuff.
Walkers, haunted objects from the 1890s.
Yeah, he's got cool stuff, man.
Amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And we're going to just keep that up until we get back to normal.
I love that because let me tell you, as someone, I like the off the beaten path stuff. I think I know some of my favorite vacation things have been smaller too. Not only just, they don't necessarily have to be like totally bizarre, but just smaller. Like for example, we went to Scotland and we did like a small bus tour, it was like 8 people. Like, and you know, you kind of leave from the same bus depot with the big buses. And I know we were able to go to places that others weren't. And, you know, I like that experience a lot. And there's nothing worse than doing like a search and like going to like TripAdvisor and being like, oh, top 10 places to visit in Edinburgh, the Bennigans. It's like, I don't, what are you doing to me here? You know, it's like, it's the worst. TripAdvisor will make me want to throw my computer out the window sometimes with that, where it's like top 10 places and it's like Applebee's. Okay. And then the putt golf course. And I'm like, what is this? Like, this is so lame. Okay. Exactly. We spent a lot of time on what you're working on. I now want to move to our second question. And here we go.